As each of us progress through life, gathering experience and perspective, we seldom have the opportunity to recount our personal stories and impart the knowledge we've gained. Walking among us, one and all, are living legacies.
Hi, I'm Tom Morrow. Welcome to a special edition of Living Legacy. Today we have three living legacies that have been on this show in previous years, but our goal today is to talk about those who have gone before us who can't speak for themselves anymore. And I couldn't think of a better panel to start this show off with than John Steiger, who was born here in Oceanside. I won't say how many years ago, but he can tell us if he cares to later on. Jack White, who came to Oceanside when he was about 4 years old, grew up here and went to high school, graduated in 1957. And of course, Tom Missett, our former publisher of the Blade Tribune, and came here in 1967. So all three of these gentlemen knew most of the people that we are going to talk about today, and we hope that we're going to be mentioning some people that will bring back some fond memories. John, you started out with the Bank of America in 1937 after graduating from high school. Who was the manager of that bank at that time?
Mr. Roy Hoover. Mr. Roy Hoover was a Saturday Evening Post customer of mine for many years, when the Saturday Evening Post was a nickel. And
it came out on Saturday evening.
I don't know when it came out. We got it in the middle of the week.
You read it Saturday evening.
Yeah. Well, I looked at the pictures. They used to have a great cover, and I can't remember the name, but
Norman Rockwell.
Norman Rockwell.
Yeah.
Who were some of the businessmen around town?
Oh, well, isn't that funny that I can't remember them? And I used to deal with all of them.
You mentioned Ed Pogue.
Ed Pogue. Pogue had a men's store. When I went to work for the bank, they didn't pay very much. They paid $60 a month, and but I felt that I had to look like the other, as well dressed as the other people in the bank. And Ed Pogue played on that, and he made a deal with me. He says, "Just pay me $10 a month, and you can come in and run an account at my store." Well, that sounded pretty good. I'd never been offered credit before, and so I'd go in and buy every payday. Well, I'd go in and buy.
You were about 18, 19 years old?
I was 17 when I started with the bank, And that was, Ed Pogue was, I just got to know him real well. Next to his store was C. Hensel. Mr. Hensel had a jewelry store, and in the back of his jewelry store there was an optometrist, and that was James W. Tucker.
Well, now, John, just so that people can get an idea, in the downtown area, where was the Bank of America at that time? Was it on the northwest corner of what is today Mission and Coast Highway? Is that the building?
That's very close. It was on the
northeast side.
East side, yeah.
Okay.
The bank on the west side had gone broke during the Depression, so it was just a big empty building that stared at us. We often wondered what are they going to do with it.
Jack, when you came, when you was growing up, do you remember any of these businessmen?
Yeah, I remember a lot of them. Oceanside had two stoplights when I grew up, and there was no freeway. Hill Street was the main street. And if you wanted to go to the beach on a hot summer day, you would walk for miles to get to one of the stop signs. That was the only safe way to get across the street. I can remember my mother saying, "Now, if you're going down to the beach, walk down to the stop sign and cross there." There was one at Colby's Drugstore at what I guess would be
3rd Street.
Yeah.
Now Pierview Way.
Pierview Way. And then there was one at 2nd, which is Mission.
These are electric traffic signals?
Electric traffic signals.
This is to stop the Highway US 101 traffic that was going north and south.
That's right. And it was bumper to bumper. When the races were on at Del Mar, oh my gosh, you had to really, there were some horrible accidents. My uncle was a police officer. He was a captain on the police force. And I learned very early on in my life that if I did something wrong, now Oceanside when I grew up had a population of 6,500 people, and we literally all knew each other. When you walked down the street, you'd say, "Hello, John," because you knew John Steiger, or you knew whoever. In those days, the Beck brothers, I think, had the paper.
Right.
And you knew everyone, and or went to school with their children, or whatever. But I can remember word of any trouble I ever got into got home before I did. And after a couple of pretty good lickings, I just decided it's going to be much easier to live by the rules than to try to break them.
Well, you mentioned Harold and Paul Beck. Did either one of you know him very well?
I went to school with Bill, his son, who became,
Paul's
I believe, the first Marlboro man on television.
He's the one that died of cancer?
No, I think he's still living.
Well, you know, a couple of those Marlboro guys
did, but not Bill. Bill's still very much alive.
Now,
and I think
now
lives in
Bill
Palm
was
Springs.
the son of Paul?
I think
Or
Harold Beck, yeah.
Harold, okay.
Lived
They,
on Corn
the
Street.
Beck brothers came here in 28, 29, right in time for the stock market crash. And there were three papers. There was the News, the Blade, and the Tribune. And I forget which one was 5-day deal, but they bought them all and combined them. They were a newspaper family out of Iowa. And Paul Beck and I were very good friends. And,
Interesting. I delivered papers for Robert K. Beck, their younger brother, the youngest brother, who owned the paper in Centerville, Iowa, and that's the Centerville Daily Iowegian. That's when I heard the Beck brothers out here. I couldn't believe it.
yeah, that's right, same family.
It was
right.
the same family.
You've come full circle, Tom.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, I delivered papers for the Blade Tribune, and I think I was paid $5 a week. But the best part of it was, in those days, there was no Sunday paper. So you really only worked 5 days. I don't think there was a Saturday paper either. And I think I got $5 a week. And the best part was they paid every Friday. So you had money in your pocket all the time. $5 was a great deal of money when I was growing up in the mid-50s.
Now, was Elm Glazer in business at that time, or did he come later?
A little later. A little later. He was,
And we're talking late 30s, all through the 40s, right? I mean, the men that we're talking about now.
gosh, I can't remember.
Well, while we're talking about those early days, Jack, you wanted to talk about Marie Bradley, and then you went to school to Marie Bradley.
Oh,
She
yes.
was what kind of?
English.
That's right,
teacher?
English teacher.
Okay.
John graduated 20 years before I did from Oceanside High School. And he had Marie T. Bradley as a school teacher. I had her as a school teacher. She introduced me to Shakespeare.
Oh,
But the most important thing, she taught me about auxiliary verbs. There are only 21 auxiliary verbs. I can still recite them because of Marie Bradley. And once after I had finally gone into television and become an anchor man, and when you're an anchor man, you have a bad day. Everybody in San Diego County knew it. Now, most people have a bad day and their wife knows about it, or their children, or maybe their employer. But when you're an anchor man, if you have a bad day, the whole county knows about it. And I'd had a particularly bad day. And apparently I hadn't conjugated some of my auxiliary verbs properly because I received a letter from Marie T. Bradley. And this was long after I graduated from high school and college, and I was now in San Diego.
But still, she felt responsible.
She said, and she had written down the quote, the mistake I'd made, and she said, I know that you know what an auxiliary verb is because I taught it to you. And proceeded to tell me of where I'd made my mistake, and if I would just pay attention to little things, I received an English lesson all over again. It was 3 single-space typed pages on that onion skin paper, and I still have the letter. I wouldn't let anything happen to it for the world.
What did the business community look like in 1967 when you moved here?
When I came here, Elms Men's Store was my largest advertiser. And Elms, of course, had just moved up to Mission Square off of Hill Street. J.C. Penney's and Hucklebee's were the 2 big department stores downtown. They were just getting ready to start construction on Plaza Camino Real. They were compacting the dirt out there. Elm Glazer had just conveniently located a sewage pumping plant right in front of the new shopping center, hoping that it would go over.
This was down in south of Vista Way?
Yes, the piece of property between the shopping center and 78 on the south side is in Oceanside. Right. Well, no, you're talking about 78.
Yeah.
And the shopping center, the piece right in front of the frontage road was in Oceanside.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they sold that off.
Yeah, they sold it off. Yeah.
And so Elm, of course, had the first shopping center in North County, Mission Square, and the word has it that Elm arranged to have that sewage pumping plant put in so the new shopping center would have a nice neighbor down there on Highway 78.
There was a lot of shenanigans going on between Carlsbad and Oceanside in those days.
Yes.
And I think still is. Still are.
Right.
Well, good thing Mrs. Bradley was.
She wasn't listening yet.
Right.
We were the big fat dumb city with Carlsbad. We took them on as a neighbor, a good neighbor. We looked out for them. When we started the Junior Chamber of Commerce, we named it the Oceanside Carlsbad Junior Chamber of Commerce. We had 150 members from Oceanside and 3 from Carlsbad. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we did that, though, was we could meet at the Carlsbad Hotel. Mm-hmm. Spence Reese, who was kind of a godfather to an awful lot of young fellows in the area, he allowed us to headquarter the Junior Chamber at the hotel. Mm-hmm. And
which hotel was this?
It was the California Carlsbad. It was a big hotel like the Biltmore, and it's gone. Mm-hmm. There's now a retirement home there. They tore it down and have kind of the same design. Mm-hmm. But that was the favors that we did for Carlsbad, and we still do them. They're just like having a spoiled child, and we just keep spoiling it. Because we ended up, by mistake, not being alert, we gave them the car country, and that was a big income tax.
Well, I don't know if we gave it to them, John. The location of car country at that time was when the nation was going through small dealerships because I had just come out here from the Midwest, and that had been going on there. And there was really no place to put car country, to have a freeway exposure in Oceanside. And I looked up there at Goat Hill, and but John Malmo and the boys put together a good package, and
they had where they were going to put it was between El Camino Real and Jefferson.
Yeah, but that wasn't freeway. That was a Mel Smith deal.
It was 78.
Yeah,
78 was still a free.
Yeah, but as far as the national, the Ford Motor Company, they wanted interstate freeway exposure.
Well, that was the argument they could use. That,
exactly.
As we talk about a lot of these, some women, mostly men, businessmen, that really built the city. I think that it's interesting to keep in mind that today, where you're run by all these corporations own the businesses in town, and city officials are, they're not the businessmen or the business types that they were back when the three of you were in your formative years.
Sure. Ed Pogue and Fennell and John Strager and a lot of those guys all went out. They not only created their business, but they financed it. They ran it themselves. They did everything, including sweeping the sidewalk in front of the store or whatever it was.
And there's not much of that today.
You can't. Most of the corporations have taken everything over, and you have to either franchise or whatever. And you don't see that.
That changed the whole complexion of the community.
Sure did, because we talked about that earlier. When I walked down the street, when I would go from my grandmother's house to work at the Star Theater in the evening, I would stop at certain places and just go in and say hello. I knew everybody along the way. They knew me. They'd known me since I was a boy. and we lost that wonderful little homogenized small town quality.
Well, let's talk about some of those businessmen. Ray Wilcox.
Yeah.
Tom, you...
Well, I first met Ray Wilcox when I came to town because Jack and Bobby Thill, who another, I won't say pioneer family, but have contributed a lot to this city. And Ray, of course, is former mayor in 1950, I believe, and he was Bobby's father. He came out here from Oklahoma with his wife Dora, and quality people.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a break, and then we'll continue with the Wilcox family when we come back. This is a special edition of Living Legacy. I'm Tom Morrow, and we're talking with John Steiger, Jack White, and Tom Missett about the people who built Oceanside that no longer are here to talk for themselves. We'll be back in just a minute.
Can I help you, sir?
Found these over by the stairs.
Okay, thank you.
What are they?
Love handles. Lots of people lose them taking the stairs instead of the escalator.
Over here! Did you know that the first person to fly faster than the speed of sound was Chuck Yeager back in 1947?
No.
I didn't think so.
It's fun to know history. Find curious facts from America's past at loc.gov, the Library of Congress website.
We're back, and we're going to continue our discussion that we were talking about before the break. Ray Wilcox.
Well, Ray, I knew Ray very well, and Ray was one of the gentlemen who did the original appraisal on Pendleton for the government when it was sold. And like John said, he was mayor. Very prim and proper individual, except over in the corner at a cocktail party. He's one of the funniest guys I ever met in my life.
Is that right?
Yeah, I have some fond memories of Ray.
Now he started out working at Safeway.
Yeah, he came out here. I think that's where he started, or maybe some other grocery store. But he was in the grocery business.
Well, you had a funny story to tell about how he built things up.
Yeah, I said I asked Ray because Ray owned quite a bit of property around town. I said, "Well, Ray, how did you accumulate all your property?" He said, "Well, I'd buy a piece, Tom, and then I would mortgage that to buy another piece, and I'd mortgage that to buy another piece." And I said, "Well, Jesus, I'm a young man, and I didn't like to owe any money." And I said, "Well, you must have owed a lot of money." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how'd you sleep at night?" He said, "I slept like a baby's, but I'm sure those bankers were tossing it."
What about Al Thill?
Well, I never knew Al. Al was, of course, I heard millions of stories from Jack. Jack's father. Jack's father was a real role model for Jack.
The thing that impressed me the most about Al Thill's house was he lived next door to my aunt and uncle on Alberta Street there, and I remember in the dining room they had a little thing built into the floor, and you could step on it, and it sent a signal to the kitchen so that the server could bring the meal in. And I thought that had to be the best thing that you could possibly have, so that they would know when to serve you dinner. And I asked once about when did you? They said, "Well, I don't think we ever used the darn thing."
His wife probably said, "You come and get it."
Now, what did Al Thill do for a living? He was a businessman here in town.
Yeah, he operated this pool hall and kind of a tobacco shop. I mean, he had
those are intricate. Those were important businesses back in those days.
Well, yeah,
for the guys anyway.
And he made money. I mean, he was a successful businessman in that he didn't go broke. I mean, he made money every week.
His place was kind of next to the old Margot Theater,
yeah,
which is now the Town or
the Sunshine Brooks.
Sunshine Brooks Theater, yeah.
We'll get to the theaters in a minute, but we don't want to miss talking about Wally Hatter.
Well, Wally was in the next generation. He followed those boys.
What we're talking about is basically before or during World War II, and Wally and yourself and a few others came after World War II, because you were all in the service during the war.
Yeah, I was in the Air Corps.
Well, Wally was a neighbor of mine business-wise when I moved the newspaper from downtown to out on South Hill Street. I had our insurance agents were right behind us, and Wally, of course, one of his claims to fame was he was the voice of the Pirates for a gazillion years. And every Friday night you could hear Wally Hatter if you drove by Oceanside High out there announcing the ball games. I think Larry did a little bit of that as time went on, and that's where Larry and I got to know each other, being neighbors. And and his dad was just a ball of energy at all times. Larry Hatter, when he came Wally, when he came into the room, and he had
I
a
thought
great.
you were talking about Wally.
Yeah, Wally. Yeah. And he had a great sense of humor and nice presence.
Well, I was going to say Wally and Larry have different personas.
Right.
Irwin Sklar.
Irwin Sklar was a true dilettante, a man who was not an expert on anything but loved everything. I met Irwin Sklar not just because of his work in the theater business, but he was an amateur magician. A lot of people didn't know that, but he had a lot of magic tricks, and if he'd have a dinner party or something, he'd always do a couple of little magic tricks at the table, and was quite proficient. He told me once that his interest had waned over the years. He said there was just too much to keep him going, but we would oftentimes talk about new magic tricks whenever we would see each other. Irwin Sklar was one of the shakers and movers to bring us the Oceanside Harbor. And that probably was one of the best things that ever happened to this community. And what is so exciting is there was a window of opportunity. And Irwin knew when that window should be opened and when it should be closed.
Now, Irwin owned
the Crest Theater. He built the Crest Theater at the corner of First and Tremont, I think, or Freeman.
Yeah, it's now Seagaze.
He made his money in the meat business, didn't he?
I think he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
Now, didn't he was on the city council when
He was the mayor.
Yeah.
Mayor.
He was the mayor. And I think you told me you thought he was probably the best mayor we ever had.
Absolutely. As far as commerce goes, Irwin Sklar was. I met Irwin as soon as I came to town. He had a million ideas. He was all. A real quick story. He came by to see me one day and said, "Come on, Tom, we're going to go down the corner of Cassidy and what is now the freeway." And it was the old Frazee farm down there. And he says, Kmart wants to come to town, and I'm going to talk old man Frazee into selling this property to Kmart. He said, "I want you to help me." Well, he knew that I was interested in Kmart because they're one of the largest advertisers in the country at that time. So here we go. And old man Frazee's on the tractor, and he pulls up, and Irwin says, I forget Frazee's first name, but he says, "We need you to sell this property to Kmart. They're offering you $100,000 an acre, $1,000,001. I remember the figures. And he goes, "I don't know, Irwin, it's a lot of money." He goes, "Well, what'd you pay for this?" He said, "I paid $27 an acre." He said, "But I'm not going to sell it." And Irwin goes, "Well, give me one reason why not." He says, "You know, I hardly ever see my kids, Irwin. But if I have $1,100,000, they're going to be over here every day."
Oh, for God's
Irwin
sake.
said, "Well, that is a good reason." True story. And of course, Kmart didn't buy the property and went on to locate on down off of Mission.
Well, now you, Jack, when you were in high school, you worked basically at all the theaters at one time or another, didn't you?
I never worked for Irwin Sklar, but I did have dealings with Irwin. We had a popcorn machine at the gymnasium at Oceanside, Carlsbad High School in those days, and we had to buy our supplies through Irwin Sklar. And what I really admired about the man, oftentimes he would forget to send the school a bill. We'd get the popcorn and the cooking oil and the salt and whatever we needed. And somebody would say, "Did we pay for that? We've got to get some more. Did we pay for the last?" And we'd go down to Irwin, he'd say, "Well, I think you did. I don't know." Everybody knew darn well we never paid for it.
And he did, too.
Yeah, Irwin just would send it up. And but he was just a guy that I think really cared about this community. And I think Tom hit it right on the head. He just could talk about anything, and he could go. He had a little showmanship flair to him.
Yes, he did.
And he could make you, if you sit down, eyeball to eyeball with Irwin, after he got through talking, you'd think, by golly, he's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's how he got his way on a lot of things.
Well, this next gentleman just passed away, and he got me started in San Diego in the public relations business. But he was a fixture in this town for quite some time. Irv Grossman, and you knew Irv. He was the editor when you took over the paper.
Correct.
He was a sports editor when I worked there.
Yeah.
You used to write for him once in a while.
Yeah.
Best writer I ever knew, bar none.
Yes.
There wasn't anybody that was a better writer than Irv Grossman.
There was never a rewrite.
No.
It came straight out of that typewriter and went right to.
And
the
he
print
gave
room.
it to me. He wrote a baseball column for ESPN and for a newsletter back in those days in the '80s when I worked for him. And he'd give me these copy, and he says, "Copy, read that." Well, I couldn't find anything wrong with it. It'd make him mad. He'd say, "Now, come on, there's got to be something wrong." And then he'd catch him, he'd be grinning. He knew darn well that I wasn't going to find anything wrong with it.
He was a promoter too. I mean, he brought Floyd Patterson in here to train for one of his fights. They used to have that dinner for the heroes,
That's right.
athletes, and they put all that together. And that's every town needs something like that. And I mean, John did his share, and Jack, I'm sure, did his share. But promoting the city and in his quiet way, Irv did a lot of things around here.
Well, Irv had a distinctive personality, and you and he came toe to toe right after you first got here.
Right after I arrived, yes.
Do you want to tell that story?
Well, although I was in the newspaper business, I'm a writer of checks, not stories. I had brothers that did that, and so I asked her. I'd been here about 2 weeks. I'm 26 years old. I don't speak with a Boston accent, as you probably
Irv was a Harvard and Columbia graduate.
He wasn't quite too sure about this young Southern boy that came in here to save the paper. And so I asked Irv, I said, Irv, I need an editorial Sunday on the following, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me, he'd hold his head like that, and he'd go, why don't you write yourself, Tom? I'm busy. I said, well, I can write it myself, Irv, but if I do, I said, what the hell do I need you around here for? He went, how'd you want that to go now? But then Irv went on to promote women's tennis, to work for the Padres. Irv and I became very good friends after he left the paper, and I had nothing but respect for the guy.
Irv gave me my biggest lesson in writing. When I was just a boy, I bought an old speed graphic camera from Don Penning down on Hill Street there, and I think it was one of those things where I walked in and gave him $5, and he told me to take the camera and go learn how to use it, and then if I still wanted it, why, I could buy it from him. Otherwise, he'd give me the $5 back.
Businessmen did that in those days.
That's the way it worked. Yeah. So I took the camera out, and I learned, and I started working for the paper, shooting pictures. And one night I was working at the Palomar Theater, and I got this phone call from the paper, and they said, the St. Milo Lumber Company is on fire. And it's going to go to the ground. It's a 4-alarm fire, and we don't have anybody to shoot it. Go out and get some pictures. So I left my job at the theater, and I went down and I shot all of these pictures, and I took them back down to the paper. And in those days we were doing a Sunday morning paper, and Irv said, all right, he said, as soon as your negatives come out of the soup, print them, and I'll pick the pictures we want to use. And he says, then I want you to sit down and write the cut lines. Well, I didn't know what a cut line was. It's the little thing that goes under the picture. So I started writing, and I'm writing the whole story. And he says, no. He says, I will write the story. You write the cut line. And I said, excuse me, Irv, what's a cut line? So he says, this is not the time to teach journalism, but, and he stopped everything. He's on deadline, trying to get a newspaper out for the morning, and he says, now here's what I want you to do. Compliment the picture. That's all. Just tell me what I'm looking at. And if there's a name of somebody in there, put their name in, and for God's sake, spell it right. And that was a lesson that I'll never forget.
You might have been here when this happened, but he was noted for this one little trick that he did when Winston Churchill died. Winston Churchill was near death, and Irv knew he just said, he wanted to be the first newspaper in the country to report this. So the story goes, and Irv told me about it. He held the press until the very last minute, and sure enough, along around midnight, 1 o'clock, or whatever it was, across the AP wire, that Winston Churchill had died. And he got headlines the next morning. It was the only paper on the West Coast. He says it was the first paper in America to have the story.
Yeah, if it was West Coast, it would have been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Irv was famous for holding the press. We had several talks about that. My philosophy of a newspaper is they'd rather have it on the front porch at the prescribed time than 3 hours later with that story that you think so highly in.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We're going to take another break, and we'll be back in just a short moment with more about early Oceanside.
Sure, my neighbors Gene and Louise, they may be superheroes with superpowers, but that doesn't make them so super at saving energy and money.
Honey?
I may not be able to harness the power of the elements, but I save significant cash and help the environment with appliances, electronics, and windows featuring the Energy Star label. So discover your own energy-saving superpowers. Go to ase.org/consumers.
Mom, Dad's making fondue again.
For anyone who believes there should always be someone to bring relief when people need it most. For anyone who thinks people in need can mean any people, any time, any place. For anyone who believes a little knowledge taught in a lot of neighborhoods can make a family safer, then you must believe the Red Cross is a pretty great thing. To do all this, the Red Cross needs your generosity. Please call now and offer your support, because help can't wait.
We're back with this special edition of Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, your host. We're talking with John Steiger, Jack White, and Tom Missett about business people that were in Oceanside in years past that can no longer speak for themselves. There were a lot of celebrities at various times in Oceanside over the years. I know that you knew Ben Hecht.
I met him a few times. My mother had given me this book, which was called Child of the Century, and it was his life story. And in this book, he tells that David Selznick came to him at St. Malo, where he lived down there. And that was a story all unto itself, just getting him in there. And
this is down on the beach.
Down on the beach,
Southern Oceanside.
South Oceanside. But they were ready to make Gone with the Wind, and Selznick did not have a shooting script. And he wanted Ben Hecht to write it. And Hecht said, I don't like those kinds of stories, I don't want to write it, but he says, as long as you brought your secretary, I'll dictate the script to her. And in the course of a weekend, according to this book, they wrote the first half of Gone with the Wind, the screenplay.
In Oceanside.
This has been about the time you graduated from high school. And Ben Hecht retired to his home down there and at St. Malo, and he would occasionally come to the Star Theater to see movies. And one night he came in to see a movie, and I remember it vividly. It was called El Toro. And it was made by a young man in Spain about bullfighting. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the word auteur filmmaker. He was an auteur filmmaker. And Hecht came in, and we always just let him come into the theater. And that didn't happen very often at our theater, but we did. We let him in. And he came out after the theater. He was waiting for his car to come and pick him up. And I made a little small talk with him, and I said, did you like the movie? And that's when he said, I think we need more of these auteur filmmakers, which was, again, a term I hadn't heard, but it became very popular in the 60s and 70s, of one person writing, producing, making a film, all by themselves. And I felt that I had a rapport with this guy, and I wanted to be a writer. Now, this is about 1957, 58. And I knew where he lived, and I knew that he took a walk early in the morning on the beach. And I'm setting up on that railroad trestle down there, and sure enough, here comes Ben Hecht. It's about 7:30 on a rather cold, brisk, overcast morning. And I got down off the trestle and went down and introduced myself and asked him if he remembered me, and he said he did. And I said, well, I want to be a writer, and I think the hot spot right now is Cuba. Now, this is pre-Castro, this is pre-Bay of Pigs, all of that sort of thing, but all you had to do was read the newspaper and you knew that it was heating up pretty fast down there. And he stood and looked at me for a moment, and he said, do you speak Spanish? And I said, well, I took a little Spanish in high school, which was a big lie. I didn't speak any Spanish at all. And he said, do you work for a syndicate? And I, no. He said, well, in that case, if you go to Cuba, I think you can probably live maybe 22, maybe 24 hours, but no longer. He said, now, I would advise you to stay the hell away from Cuba. And if you want to write the great American novel, I'd write it about Oceanside. Because there are about 10,000 stories out here that are just begging to be told. And he says, and when you write it, bring it back, I'd like to read it. And he'd been fondling this cigar the whole time in his hand. And he put it in his mouth. He looked me right in the eye, lit the cigar, as if to say, now go away and do what I told you. And he walked on down the beach. Probably the best advice I ever had in my life.
Well, for the viewers at home that don't recognize the name Ben Heck, front page, he was a
newspaper.
A Chicago newspaper.
Chicago Tribune. And he and Charles McCarthy wrote a play called Front Page that later became a wonderful movie. Made about 4 or 5 times. Yeah. His Girl Friday, it was titled with one time. And anyway, but he also wrote a lot of screenplays. Later I found out that he really didn't care much for Hollywood. But one of the pictures he made was called Let Freedom Ring. And I think it was a morale builder during World War II. And it starred Nelson Eddy. And I think that was the picture that Nelson Eddy sang Stout-Hearted Men in. And I talked to him about that movie once, and he said, yes, he says, I did that for money.
Well, Sonia Henney, the great Olympic skater, she was from Norway?
Norway, that's right.
Now she settled, lived here in Oceanside, and
well, she didn't live here really, but she claimed she lived here occasionally.
She had a lot of money here.
Yeah, well, she bought the 1,600-acre Dunn Ranch, which at one time belonged to my grandfather. Anyway, she bought that for, I think it was $50 an acre. And she bought it, she was motivated because Leif Henney, her brother, was being embarrassed by suggestions that he ought to get in the service. And he had 3 kids, but anyway, he reacted and she reacted, and they went and bought this 1,600-acre ranch. It had frontage on the railroad track down along Oceanside Boulevard, some frontage up on El Camino, some frontage down on Vista Way, and clear down to where the Tri-City Hospital is. And she was kind of quiet. Her mother would visit her brother all the time, and so they would get together, and they decided, and she decided that they were going to have a subdivision. So this is how I happened to meet them. They decided, and they had some L.A. designers of note, valuable type, costly type developers. You can tell by some of the old roads. It's a residential area, but they've got a bank in them for speedsters, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, she was. She wanted big lots, and we ended up buying a portion of one when I have to talk about I on this thing now, but the lot that that I was involved in, I started. We were running ads advertising the Henny Hills because they weren't doing very well, and we didn't represent them, but we ran the ads and said what great locations and the views and all that.
How much did they cost in those days? You remember?
I don't know. It was the biggest cost of the real estate business.
$10,000, yeah.
No, but they were. That's what was tough on the real estate, you really had to be a gambler, and that's where Paul Bick was very friendly.
I thought you were talking about how much the ads cost you.
Yeah.
The lots.
The lots were about 5,000, 5,500,
okay.
2,800.
Well, the Henny Hills, of course, also on that piece of property is El Camino Country Club.
Yeah, that was a project at
Maricosta College.
I got Henny to, in effect, he sold that to the developers, the golf course, because we needed a golf course, and I said, you know, the area needs one, you need one. And that was really the selling job on the thing, and they paid it was 180 acres. We put part of the why 180 acres for a golf course, we wanted to give them the spare land, the fat to live on, because I told them, I said, you're pioneering and you're going to need to live off of the surrounding area, which Vallis later lived off of. But that's another story. But anyway, Sonia, I got to know her, and she was a very attractive lady and smart,
she was
hardworking.
in several movies, wasn't she?
Yes.
She saved I would say, the American movie business. She and Shirley Temple during the war.
They were at Fox.
Yeah, 20th Century Fox.
Now, just before we leave her, you were kind of instrumental in getting her to sell the land for Maricosta College.
Well, we told him, Henny, and her brother, and we told Sonia that it's the best site. She says, I know they'd come. She had letters from the lawyers of the school board, and they were busy. They didn't talk to me. They talked directly to her, and it kind of made her suspicious of what are they doing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she'd ask, and then she said, I don't want to sell it. And her hilltop was the nicest hilltop on her 1,600 acres.
Panoramic view.
Yeah, and it was the greatest thing that happened to the college, frankly. And I was for it, but she wasn't. And so, I don't know, I talked too much, and some of the other real estate people, they started making a mistake. They moved in on her, you know, and so pretty soon it was getting pretty bad. They had lawyers. It was embarrassing, and she just said, I'm not going to sell it to them. And I said, Sonia, your property, you'll benefit on the whole piece. Your whole 1,600 acres will be worth more if they put that college there. And you can't live on every foot of your property. I mean, you may want to, but you can't do that anyway. She said, well, they, and I said, you know, you can make a phone call and talk to John McDonald, who's president of the college, and tell him that, in fact, I'll call him and tell him that you're going to call him if you'll call. And she said, okay. So I called John and I said, you're going to get a call from Sonia Henny. She's upset with all these people that are giving her a bunch of crap, and they're going to sue her, and they actually had letters. We got copies of letters that some of the local attorneys, you know, they could still be in lawsuits, you know. So anyway, and within 20 minutes, she cozied up to John on the phone, and he said, oh, we can handle that.
So John really closed the deal.
He closed it.
Well, we're running out of time. I want to get a few other names in. You knew Leo Carrillo, or you were a kid.
I played golf with his daughter occasionally, and stepdaughter, I believe, and we had a lot of fun. I would see him at the Acapulco Gardens having dinner occasionally.
Well, that was right across the street from what is now the paper.
So my daughter said in the 4th grade, when they asked if anybody in her class knew where Acapulco was, and she raised her hand. She was right across the street from the Blade Tribune. Dad goes over there every night.
Yeah.
Of course, they were talking about Mexico, right?
Yes.
We had Gene Autry and the Angels baseball team come down and have dinner there one night. The junior chamber brought them down because they were starting this new ball club up in Anaheim. And there was no ball club in San Diego, and they were trying to get interest down here. And that was a big night. John brought up the Junior Chamber of Commerce. He's the guy that started it really here. And I think that is or was the best opportunity for young people in this community. And I can think of hundreds that have gone on to become good businessmen who all started out working in the Junior Chamber.
The Junior Chamber is really responsible for the opportunity of the harbor. We started talking quietly that we needed to, the base could go and decide to be surplus. We had no control, but if it did, and it's happened all over the country, we should have a plan in the city. And they, you guys, you're going to embarrass us. You're going to make them think that we're, and blah, 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 blah.
Before we get into the harbor too much, we're going to take another break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about just how that harbor came into being, because I think it's a fascinating story. You're watching a special edition of Living Legacy, and I'm Tom Morrow. We'll be back right after these messages.
So, what have we got here? Sometimes you feel tired. You can't seem to lose those extra pounds off your midsection. And your joints hurt when you take the stairs? Well, you're getting older. But I'm happy to say that there's some simple things we can do to keep you happy and healthy for years to come. We can also lower your risk for some serious diseases the older population is often subject to. Proper nutrition is more important than ever. Your body has changed, not as many treats. A basic exercise plan, lots of walks and fresh air, and most importantly, come and see me for twice yearly checkups to help ensure the best possible quality of life. Now, how does that sound? Good boy.
Improve the quality of life for your elderly pet. Schedule twice yearly checkups that include preventive care and regular lab work. A message from the veterinary members of the American Animal Hospital Association.
We're back, and for the final segment of this special edition of Living Legacies, I'm Tom Morrow, talking with John Steiger, Jack White, and Tom Missett. The harbor, it just didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen. The Junior Chamber of Commerce really should have the credit, because what they did not worry about taking credit for it. Our strategy was that we involved all the wheels we could, even in Tom Braden. And
who was then publisher of the paper.
Yeah. I mean, we got everybody that we could get involved in one way or another. That's how we got Erwin Sklar, who really became the pusher.
He made several trips back to Washington.
Oh yeah, and he liked all of us. We were all. He'd like to have been our age, but in fact, he came into Bob Schaefer's store. Bob was a very active citizen that just do all kinds of things for Oceanside, and Erwin went in one day and he says, that you Junior Chamber fellows are talking about making a yacht harbor out of that boat basin up there. And he said, I'd like to get on that committee. Am I too old to be in the... And Bob says, you got your checkbook with you? and Erwin said, no. Well, yeah, I do. He said, well, just here, make out a check for... And he gave him the amount of the dues and the life membership and everything he could. And after he got the check, he said, I'll make sure that you don't worry about that age thing.
Carpenter was very active in that service.
Yeah.
Harold?
Yeah.
Well, now, you and I have been threatening to do this for years. You've got some video and film.
I was one of those Junior Chamber of Commerce guys at that time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I took my little 8mm movie camera out there from the day that they first broke ground, and every week or so I get down and shoot some more scenes of what they were doing.
And speaking of that breaking the ground, if we could, I don't know whether the camera can get it or not, but that's the ground breaking right there.
Yeah.
And that's Elm Glacier on the right, and the man in the center is Frank Lilly. He was
he was
the
city manager for many years.
And then we don't know who the others are, right?
We're guessing.
Well, they had several groundbreakings.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, they were having them.
That
all
was
over.
one of the ground.
Yeah.
One of the many.
Yeah.
Well, I began shooting these films, and I thought I lost them at one point. You move around all. And in cleaning out some things, my wife said to me, she says, I wish we could clean some of this stuff out. I found this reel and had the presence of mind to put it on a projector, and here it was. So I promise you, you're the only one that's going to get it, Tom. I'm doing the show. I'm going to get some of these guys, John, together, and we're going to talk about how that came about and make a special program.
Okay.
It's going to be a long
Who were some of the other names involved?
Well, the general out there is the secret military aide to the whole thing. And he was very clever because I don't know whether you know
he
this.
was your secret weapon.
He became a secret weapon, and he made it happen. What happened was that we knew that all the colonels that come out here from Washington are briefed. Don't let the camel get his nose under your tent out there.
Camel meaning Oceanside.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so they're all briefed that way, and they still are briefed that way, and they'll tell you. Anyway, we had pretty soon we had people that you guys are crazy and all that, and they were kind of insulting, and so the general. And I can't think of his name, but anyway. No, this was a guy that looked like a bulldog. I mean, he was a nice guy, but
yeah,
I'll think of it. Anyway, he told his boys. We had some Marines in the junior chamber.
That's right.
They were eager. They were going to be getting out of the service, and they liked the idea of working with guys. They
wanted to go into business.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. So anyway. He told them to tell the junior chamber people that I'd like to talk to your leaders. That would be Sklar and the committee and all that. So it was perfect for them to talk to Irwin. And the general said, well, you know that outer breakwater is big enough to take care of all you're talking about. And all you have to do, here he sounds like he's on our side. He says, the area from the boat basin to the city limits, we can talk about that. That was the opening that we got. And Irwin picked it up, and as the time went on and we were successful, then the old man's, his answer was that it was, you could walk across the opening now. I mean, at that time, it was flooded. It was, with sand. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't use it, and the Marines had to pay any time it was dredged.
That's right.
So that became surplus property.
They worked it out that the Navy, and the old general had to be the guy that sold it back there, that with the Navy coming in, the Navy ran the boats in on their amphibious. Mm-hmm. That was their real connection with the Marines. Mm-hmm. And so he had the he was it. I mean, he said, okay, look how many millions of dollars that the Marines have been spending, and the Navy spent it for them, but it hurt the Marines to spend any money on anything if they could get somebody else to spend it.
He was the pivotal point. And as I recall, the contract was that in the event of a war or an action, that harbor could then be used to load Marines if that came about. And I think that was the big selling point that we agreed to.
We've got just a short time on this segment, but there's a couple things more that I want to talk about before we close out. Tell me about the Involved Men, how you got involved with them.
With Involved Men is a group of Afro-Americans who everybody in town knew, the Jim McCargos, the Oscar Culps, the George Mitchells. I hate to leave anybody out. And the younger group was the Henry Holloways, and that group. Henry Holloway, a lot of people don't know this, is the oldest tenured elected official in the state, in the county of San Diego. He's on the MiraCosta Advisory Board. But in about 75, we were having a real racial problem downtown, and the police department was being picketed, Molotov cocktails were being talked about as a result of some things that had happened. And I got a call from the city manager, Larry Bagley at the time, and asked me to come down on a Saturday afternoon, and here were a large group of Afro-American guys that I knew, and they said, we are the involved men of Oceanside. Nobody knows about us. We're underground. We work to help young black students get scholarships, and we just want everybody to know that we've got our fingers on this situation. And I said, well, guys, it's time for being underground is over. Well, you got to come out. I want you to come to the paper right now, and tomorrow morning we'll have a front page story so everybody in this community, before some hotheads get things out of hand, let's tell the whole community about you guys. And since that time, I've been involved with the involvement. I'm a little fair complected to be in, as they tell me, to be involved with this group.
But they let you in.
They let me in. They gave me the honor of being Man of the Year twice now, and they raise a lot of money and do a lot of good for Afro-American scholarships and any new Afro-American professionals coming into town who want to get involved in the city normally go through the involved men, and that's how they get it.
Now, Oscar's still in business.
Oscar and George Mitchell have CMC furniture, which stands for Commandant of the Marine Corps. George Mitchell was Chester Pulley's, Bob Cushman's aide, and when Bob was named Commandant of the Marine Corps, he called George up and says, I just reinstated you. These two guys, and of course Oscar's son held the high jump champion record in college and high school for many years, and just class people.
We just lost Jim McCargo. He was
Sergeant McCargo. Yeah, Jim was one of the founding fathers and involved.
Sergeant Major, retired in the Marine Corps. Right. Before we end, the Curtis boys, the Curtis twins.
Two of the all-time great characters ever came out of St.
These guys are really characters.
But I'll tell you what, they were big and tough, and John was the first captain of the Harbor Patrol, and his twin brother Joe was a fireman and sort of a jack of all trades. But if something needed to be done in this town, you got the Curtis brothers involved, and they got the job done. One way or the other. The rules be damned. Forget about that. We'll just get the job done. A real quickie is, they just dedicated the boat ramp to Joe and John. Very well deserved. But at one time, I've told this story before, but one time they were working Vice in downtown Oceanside on a voluntary basis. And John, we used to have a drink just about every night, either at the Miramar or the Acapulco. And John said, yeah, Joe and I would go down. He said, if we had problems with prostitution, we'd just go get them and put them on, take them to the bus station, put them on the next bus out of town. We would call in and say, okay, this is Curtis boys, just put another hog on the dog. So they deserve a lot of recognition. John was a Carnegie Medal winner. Joe got the St. Malo recognition. Great guys.
And we lost them both in the last 5 years.
Oh, well, John just died last year, and Joe died about 2 years prior to that.
Yeah. Well, we have done it, fellas. It's time to wrap it up. We've talked about just a portion of Oceanside history. We haven't got everything, but
a lot more.
There's a lot more. Maybe we'll do it again.
So we should, because there are a lot of them we just didn't have time to talk about.
Right.
I'm Tom Morrow. This has been a special edition of Living Legacies. We hope you've enjoyed it. And on behalf of John Steiger, Jack White, and Tom Missett, good evening.